Welcome to the Note to Self podcast. I'm your host, Zoe. I'm a certified professional life coach, serial entrepreneur, verified YouTuber, and published author. On this podcast, you can expect actionable tips, reflections, and inspiration to live your best, most fulfilling life. So, let's get started. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Note to Self. Today's Note to Self is the books that I've read in the first quarter of 2022. So I don't know about you guys, but I love reading. I love learning all sorts of new things. And more recently in my life, I've gotten into reading fiction books again. It's been a long time since I got into reading fiction books. So I've got a really great balance for you on books that I've read, and they're just going to be in the order of which I finished them. I'm just going to be highlighting them, who I might recommend them for, and if I thought they were good or not. But definitely these 10, I believe it is, that I'm about to relay to you were all insightful for me in different ways. So let's just pop right in. So, the first book that I have on the list here is Messages from the Masters by Brian Weiss. So, this is all about past life regression. That's a topic that I've been interested in for a long period of time. It's also something that I've documented a lot on my YouTube channel, which I'll leave the link to that playlist below if it interests you. But Messages from the Masters by Brian Weiss is absolutely fascinating. I find every time that I come back to past life content, it seems to activate different rememberings within me and just reminds me that we are all immortal spiritual beings having a temporary human experience. And really, there's just like nothing to fear. There's no rush. We're all on this journey called life, and we're all here basically learning a lot of the same lessons, same, but different in different ways. And I just find it's a really, really comforting. It's really inspiring and super insightful. The next book on the list here is The Dark Side of the Light Chasers by Debbie Ford. I guess I'll also let you guys know which books I've read via Kindle and which ones were Audible. So Messages from the Masters by Brian Weiss, I listened to that book. But Dark Side of the Light Chasers, this is a book all about shadow work. I read this and I felt it was really powerful to read because there are exercises in this book. So you can highlight them and come back to them. And there was definitely a lot of actionable tips in this book. So that's what I really loved about it, was that sometimes I find with spiritual guidebooks, there might be journaling prompts sometimes, but Debbie Ford just really paints a picture of how to work through different triggers, or how to even, in some cases, sort of invite different triggers up to release them in a safe space, and letting yourself know on that deeper level that you are safe to transmute these different energies and integrate the shadow in different ways. And another point that I really liked about this book was that she speaks about integrating the light shadow. So, of course, we all know what the shadow is. But the light shadow is the amazing abundance that you are, the beauty and the magnificence that you are, and how you integrate that worthiness in, right? It's so interesting because, a lot of us can focus shadow work on, these darker, let's say, aspects of ourselves that need attention to integrate. But there's oftentimes a lot of the magnificence that you're not fully recognizing and integrating into yourself that is who you are, right? Think about someone who you really admire in your life. Everything that you see in them exists in you. And this book gives tangible examples of how to integrate that light shadow so that, you recognize that that is you to a deeper level. So the next book that I read, and I read this on Kindle, was Sapu in My Soul by Peter Gorman. And I also read Ayahuasca in My Blood by Peter Gorman right after that. I'm going to speak to these two books together because, yes, they're by the same author, but they're very similar and written in a very similar way. So Sapu in My Soul is all about Kambo. Peter Gorman actually brought Kambo to the Western world, introduced Sapo to the Western world. And he has such an incredible ability to story tell. So this book, I definitely recommend it, both of these books, to anyone who is interested in plant medicine, interested in Amazonian medicines, perhaps interested in going to the jungle one day or having a resonance with the Amazon. This book transported me, both of them, transported me into Peter's adventures transported me into Peter's ayahuasca ceremonies. He is so gifted, and yeah, I highly, highly recommend these books. They were books that were real page turners for me. I could not put them down. It was such an exciting read for both of them, and I feel like they are books that I will revisit one day. The next book on here is The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. So, this is a New York Times bestseller that I feel like has been in my awareness for the last year for sure. So, I'm sure that there's probably a lot of you out there who may have read it or at least heard of it. And this book, again, page turner. This book was a fiction book, which was one of the first that I read in a long time. I was very much enjoying the adventure of Peter Gorman's books that I thought, you know what, maybe I'll try out a fiction book. And wow. Wow, wow, wow. I don't want to give anything away in this book, but it was just so well written. It was so beautiful and yeah, just yeah, it just incredible. So visual is what I want to say to that too, is that it was a book that really felt like you were going on an adventure, that you were watching a movie. So for any of you who are looking for an outstanding fiction book, I highly recommend it. And then I read Malibu Rising, which is also by Taylor Jenkins Reid, and I read this on Kindle as well. It was definitely a page turner. Taylor Jenkins Reid, she's amazing. I have a few other books of hers already downloaded as samples in my Kindle that I can't wait to explore. Malibu Rising is basically about this cool surfer family in Malibu, and I'll leave it at that. I don't want to give anything away. If you're looking for a page turner fiction, this one's it. And the next book that I read was Essentialism by Greg McKeown. I've read this book before. It's many years old. I actually worked with Greg McKeown when I was in the corporate world for a little bit. And I remember just he was so kind and just really smart and intelligent. And Essentialism is an incredible book. I definitely feel like anyone listening to this podcast would benefit from reading this book. There are a lot of examples from the corporate world in this book, but you can so easily reflect on your own life and how that applies. If you're looking for something to really inspire you to focus your energy, to declutter or minimize your life in different ways, minimize your mind and spring clean energy, all that good stuff, definitely recommend Essentialism. The next book I listened to here was I Hope I Screw This Up by Kyle Cease. I have been loving Kyle Cease's content for the last 6 to 8 months, I would say. Last year, I read The Illusion of Money by him, which I highly recommend. And I Hope I Screw This Up was also an amazing listen. He's really funny, he's really insightful, and I feel like he's really on it with the messages that my soul needed to hear. So I definitely recommend I Hope I Screw This Up by Kyle Cease. And the next book that I listened to was You Deserve This by Dr. Josh Wagner. So this was an Audible book, and I felt like it was complementary to Kyle Cease's content about feeling it to heal it in different ways. It was all about uncovering undeserving belief systems and how to release them and then how to rewire in the new. So it felt like sort of a mix between Kyle Cease, Dr. Joe, and yeah, this book had a lot of exercises in it that Dr. Josh drops the website in the audiobook and prompts you to go to his website. I didn't do any of that, but I still feel like the book was insightful. So I'm not sure if you can grab yourself a physical copy. If this book is sounding like it might be something that you want to explore, I think that might be better. And then the last book that I read in this quarter was Verity. This was a fiction book. This was a Kindle book that I downloaded. And this was a page turner. Let me tell you, it was like The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, whereas like I started reading this book and within like 4 days I was done it. It was like I had to get to the end. I had to find out what happened. Verity is a thriller. It's like a romantic thriller. It was honestly quite scary and disturbing in some parts. I do not normally read books like that. I'm definitely not looking to read any more books like that. It felt like I had to read it as fast as I could to get over with the scary. Like I had to get to the end so that I didn't have to feel scared anymore. So if you like thriller books, if you like to feel a little bit scared, then I think you'll like this one. But if you If you like more of the fun or the lighter content for the fiction book, I would probably recommend Malibu Rising or The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. Anyways, guys, these are the books that I read in the first quarter of the year. I hope it granted you some insights. I'm curious if you've read any of the same books as me. If you did, just send me a little message on Instagram. You can send me a DM. I'd love to know if you have any recommendations as well. I'm keeping track of the books that I've started reading and will finish in the second quarter of this year, Q2. So I'll be sure to pop back in with another episode when that happens. But sending you lots of love and have an amazing, beautiful, abundant day. Thank you for listening to Note to Self. If you enjoyed this episode, please help me out by rating and reviewing this show on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. If my energy is resonating with you and you feel the call to work with me, there are an abundance of ways to do so. I offer one-to-one life coaching programs, mastermind containers, and DIY courses, all of which are available through my website, zoearielpoulsen.com. Until next time, take note of all the abundance that surrounds you as you make the most of this game called life.